There is an endless sea of podcasts about entrepreneurship. Talking about it, but not living it. We live it every day. This is Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkle, talking about real estate investing, but also encompassing general subjects in regards to owning small to medium-sized businesses. And of course, all the struggles that business owners must overcome to be successful. This is Inside the Wolf's Den. And this is Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkle.
Welcome back to Inside the Wolf's Den with your hosts, Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkle. Today we're actually in beautiful Cancun, Mexico. We love just anywhere we go, try to bring as much value to you. So this week we're actually at a leadership retreat in Cancun. And so we've got some tips that we've heard through the leadership and want to share it with you.
Yeah, so yesterday we had a cool guest speaker that came and spoke to us. His name was Rick Rigsby. He wrote a book, What I Learned from a Third Grade Dropout, which was his
Lessons from a third grade dropout.
So which it was his mother and just the lessons and his parents had taught him over the years. So anyways, it was a cool thing. We thought we'd share with you some of the content that he shared with us and some of the things he went over. I think it's very valuable and I think you get a lot out of it. So we just wanted to share that with you today and have some fun with it.
So today's episode, we're going to talk about being extraordinary by executing the basics.
Yeah, so it's a simple concept. I mean, it's nothing rocket science, but I know several times throughout our own businesses and our business ventures, we've had to go back to our teams and tell them, like, guys, like, just focus on the basics. Just focus on what we do well. And I think sometimes we get so consumed with like special technology and overthinking or complicated processes, and really like it comes back to just the basics, like just doing things well, like especially like in property management. Last year we had to really focus on, like, guys, like what owners want is just communicate, do what you say you're going to do, follow through. There's going to be mistakes. Yeah, you're going to have some errors along the way. But if they can understand that is if you just do the basics well and you do what you're supposed to do, what they signed up for you to do, you got an owner for life. So, and I thought this was really cool because, and this goes along with this point, because the guest speaker yesterday, Rick, how he came up, or how he was emphasizing the point, was he went back to, like, who would your grandparents hire? Who would your grandparents want to do business with? That's who you should be, and that's who you should be focused on. So I thought it was kind of cool because he talked about that our grandparents, if you really look back at our grandparents, they lived a much simpler life. They focused on just the basics. They did what they said they were going to do. They built a lot of trust, and that's who they kept doing business with, is companies and business or people that they trusted. But if you really look at our grandparents, they practiced the basics. They were very persistent and dedicated. And then our grandparents had a growth mindset. Those are the three concepts. So they practiced the basics. They would always persevere, and then they had a growth mindset. So they're relentless. That was the word he used, right. Relentless. So. Yeah.
Well, I kind of want to take you. So looking back at when we started our businesses, right, and when we didn't know anything in real estate, and so we just practice. Like our whole goal was just knocking on doors. How many doors can we knock on, right? And so it was a numbers game for us. We just got really, really good and dialed in on knocking on doors and developing that process. And eventually we practiced so much where, it just became natural, right? And we started getting deals, and it was like nothing. And same thing in any business that you do, if you just practice the basics. And he said, champions are made in the off season.
Yeah. So what was a famous quote that he kept sharing over and over again? You had it, right?
Yeah. So the famous quote was, champions are champions not because they do anything extraordinary, but because they do ordinary things better than anyone else. And that's by Chuck Noll, one of the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
So I think he won several championships. But that there's a lot to that, and I think there's a lot in that quote, because it's if you look at any successful team and you relate it to sports, they do the basics very well. If you look at the Patriots all those years and winning all those Super Bowls, and that's their coach's philosophy, with he always went back to focusing on doing the basics and doing your job. His big saying was always do your job, which again, to go back to the basics, you're in a certain role, you're hired to do a certain thing, do your job extremely well. You can add on things if you're doing your job well, but make sure you're doing your job well first before you try to add other things to it. So
yeah. Another point I want to bring up, because you brought it up a second ago, is having a growth mindset, right? How can we develop that growth mindset and having an abundance mindset? Because I think that's kind of what holds a lot of people back, is that, I don't want to share my secret with, a competitor, right? And then I think it just kind of holds them back from being great and doing anything great, because they're holding on to that.
Yeah, looking at the glass half empty instead
Right.
of half full. And so it's hard. I get it, especially like if you're just starting out and you're in survival mode, and it's sometimes hard to see. You're trying to get whatever you can, and I get that. But at some point, your mindset's got to shift to an abundance mindset where there's enough deals for everybody. There's enough properties to manage for everybody. And you have that mindset that there's opportunity out there. And I think that's something that we've done really well throughout our careers, is always seeing that there's opportunity, that we've never given up. We've always knew that the thing with us is, like, we would put in a ton of effort day in and day out, and sometimes we would get no reward back. And I think a lot of people quit too early. And if you ever looked at a lot of our big breakthroughs, it's because we put in a ton of work, a ton of effort, and we compounded that without any return. And all of a sudden we had a breakthrough and a big momentum change in our business. But it's because we put in all that other effort and legwork up front without really an immediate return.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I totally agree. And something that I've learned too. So, when growing your business, you kind of look at others, your peers, maybe your mentors, people that have done it and done it really well. And you kind of look at them for advice, right? Like they look at us a lot of times. And I think that what I've learned is that just don't take from individuals. So, they might give you all this great ideas. Always ask, like, what can I do to help you? Like everybody can add so much value to others that we don't think, right? And that's huge, because I think that if you want to get the value, you also have to give that value as well.
Yeah, I think you should always be looking at that when you're wanting to work with somebody or work with a mentor or help somebody. Like, figure out how you can help them first, and go out and do that first, and then you'll see what they'll give back 10 times that back to you. So rather than going and just wanting to take, I think try to give first, and you'll find out that you'll get a lot more in return. And that's kind of, we still do that today, even like with our guests that are on this podcast. I think it's a real honor that they willing to give their time and energy and to this podcast and spend that time with us. And so, like, I'm always looking about, how can I give back to them, for them giving that time, and how can I help them in their business? How can I give them more business in what they do to help them, and because they're helping us. So I think you always got to look at that.
Yeah,
I agree 100%. I was going to finish with, we always like books and share 3 books. So these were 3 of the books that came up, and I think they're awesome. We've read 2 of them within our companies. We do a book club, and we've read 2 of these we've done, which was Relentless by Grover. He was a exercise coach and personal trainer to Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. But it's an awesome book on just never giving up and just being relentless. If you look at Kobe and Michael, they are 2 absolutely relentless people. Kobe was, when he was his time here. And that was kind of cool that I thought, So the guest speaker started off his keynote speech, because we're in a room full of leaders that are celebrating being at the top echelon of this franchise system. And so he went up and said, okay, now what? Because that's something that Kobe did. So Kobe would always mentor and speak to all the rookies that entered the NBA. And it's like, it's one thing like, okay, you made it to the NBA, great. You're done well. You're probably going to do well financially, great. But Kobe would sit there and be like, now what? Now that you've hit this top of the mountain, kind of, now what? What's your next mountain? What are you going to do next? And so he was always looking at now what. And so that's what he started with start off was asking everybody, great, you had a great year last year. Now what? What are you going to do? Well, how are you going to make a bigger impact?
How are you going to make an impact? Yeah. And that's something I think a lot of us struggle with, is that we set goals, then we hit those goals, and then we're like, all right, like we don't have a now what, right? So yeah, I think it's awesome that you should be asking yourself now what, right? And setting that next goal.
It doesn't have to be more money and more wealth. It could just be, how can I have a bigger impact? How can I help more people? How can I be remembered? And so it's stuff like that. How can I help others have the same success? The other book was Mindset, which we haven't read yet. And then the third one was Extreme Ownership by Jocko.
Which is a fantastic book. If you have not read that book, Extreme Ownership, I highly recommend it. You are running teams, an organization. I highly recommend that you read that with your organization. That was huge for us. And you talked about like what our grandparents did well, and one of the things that they did well is they owned it, right? And so they didn't make excuses. They didn't blame others. It can't be just about you, right? So one thing that he said, that there's no such thing as bad teams, just bad leaders.
Yeah. So awesome. I think that was impactful there. So
so again, go out there and do those ordinary things, just
extraordinary.
Exactly.
So focus on the basics. Do the basics extraordinary well, and you'll have success out there. So thank you guys. Thanks for joining us here in Cancun. We're going to go hit the pool, and we'll see you all next week.
Have a great week, everyone.
You've been listening to Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkle. Tons of entrepreneurial podcasts are out there. Talking. But Joni and Shawn are living it every single day. Their portfolio now includes many franchises and medium-sized businesses. We talk about the trials and motivators of successfully running a business. Join us again soon for another podcast. But until then, reach out on the website at InsideTheWolfsDen.com, on Facebook at Inside the Wolf's Den, on Instagram at Inside the Wolf Den. We'll see you again soon. This is Inside the Wolf's Den. We'll see you next time.